Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet. This review is brought to you in part by Rogers Hobby Center in Saginaw, Michigan, where the fun begins. This review covers the 1965 Chevelle Modified Stalker. It's a 125 scale kit from AMT, number 1177. The kit was originally issued in 1972, and it doesn't really replicate an actual race car, but it's meant to look like the typical modified stalker from the period. Back then, circle tracks were everywhere, and it wasn't uncommon to see a race car in front of every garage waiting for the weekend. Now, this is a skill level 2 kit. It's recommended for ages 10 and up. It has 83 parts molded in white, chrome, and clear plastic with water slide decals and soft rubber tires, which are nicely pad printed. Now, this kit is lacking in racing detail items, and there could be possibilities for scratch building. There's no floor in the trunk area to mount the battery, and it's a really small style gas tank that probably wouldn't be enough for a very long race. It's meant to be just a fun kit that goes together and gives you a good idea of that mean, aggressive, gritty look that those cars had. Now, if you paint it up nice, it can look really great on your shelf. It was interesting to build, and it would benefit from more detailing. When you're done, the finished dimensions of this kit are about 8 inches long, 3 3/4 inches wide, and 2 1/4 inches high. Oh, that sounds like Newt. Newt's our program director, and he's got a question. Come on in here, Newt. What's on your mind?
This model is really different. Why is there a big red bar in the front?
Oh, that's a good question, Newt. That's a crash bar, and it offered some protection for the front end of the vehicle, especially the radiator, because if you punch a hole in the radiator, you're not going to race very long. It also gave some protection to the vehicle as a whole, and therefore the driver.
What's with those tires? They look like they're as big as dragster slicks.
They are pretty big, indeed. In fact, probably as big as dragster slicks are in some classes. But they were needed for adhesion to the track surface to keep the car under control, because a lot of times the tracks were just made out of dirt, or even if they were asphalt, they weren't always kept the cleanest. So you needed a lot of rubber down there to make sure you got around the circle. Here are the contents of the kit. As you can see, it's pretty crisply molded. A nice chrome tree there too. And also you see the window piece there that's made to look like the impression of a wire grid. Also those pad printed tires, they're really nice. And there's even a smaller tire for the traditional stock car setup, which we elected not to use. But if you want a real dirt tracker, that's available in the kit. For the most part, we'll be using liquid cement for construction. There's sometimes white glue for some of the clear parts, and occasionally even super glue for fragile pieces. Or you have to remember, however, to heed the manufacturer's use and safety guidelines when you use any of the products that you see or hear in the review. Here's the decal sheet, and you can see that the register is good. The colors are very nice, and there's quite a bit of latitude here in numbering and making your car look like one of those real dirt trackers. Gather up the parts for the engine, because that starts construction, and you'll have to clean up some of the flash that you're going to find on some of these old molded parts, but nonetheless it's a nice looking big block Chevy engine, and you can see that on the box art though there are headers shown, but there's no headers here. They're just cast iron exhaust manifolds, which is one of the letdowns here. I think they should have included some headers for this. So the exhaust consists of just the standard ones, and we'll paint those up and clean them up best we can. Now here's an area that will need some attention. The bell housing should appear to be one piece with no seam. So this is an area that could be sanded smooth, and I found it necessary to use a little bit of filler on both the top and bottom sides to get that to look nice. Now here is the bottom of the bell housing, showing it's needing also to be smoothed over, and then the seam on the transmission, however, should be left because there is one on the real transmission. Now, in preparation to assemble the engine, remember to scrape the paint and chrome from any of the parts that you're gluing together so that the gluing surfaces will adhere to each other. And here's the completed big block. Now I painted the block and heads Chevy engine orange. The exhaust manifolds and the transmission are steel. The alternator and the intake manifold and the base of the distributor and the exhaust were painted with some aluminum. And of course the exhaust have some parting lines that you'll need to clean up first. Now the fan belt and the top of the distributor there are flat black with some gloss black pulleys. The carb is painted with a light gold tint. Now the bell housing gets painted red to resemble a performance spec part. And the top of the air cleaner should have a black wash on it. It's chromed, but a black wash will bring out the screen detail. Alright, locate the pieces for the wheel assemblies. And the tires are two-piece slicks with Goodyear pad printed on the sidewall. And there's an extra tire in a smaller size, which is optional to be used on the front left side, which was common on oval tracks, but I didn't use that one. I just used the standard size. Now here are the tires. They're two-piece wheels and brake drums, and the wheel halves should be pushed into the tires separately as the two-piece tires are not hollow. The outsides of the front and back surfaces of the wheels should be painted the same color, and the inside surface of the wheel backs should be painted the same color as the brake drums. Now, once you're doing this, remember you got to scrape that paint off when you're gluing pieces together. Now, the surface of the tires should be lightly sanded to show some wear on the tread area, or at least the road surface area in this case. Locate all the pieces in the kit for the next phase of construction, which includes the floor pan and the chassis and the the frame and all of those pieces that will go around the interior, including the roll cage. Now glue the axle blocks into place and get that ready for paint. Scrape the plating off the areas where the axle halves go together into the quick change rear end and assemble that unit. Started by detailing the steering wheel. The whole thing had been painted black like the framework there will be, but I added some flat black to the rim and chrome to the spokes, and then I used a pin vise and small drill to drill the holes out for the spokes there. After the cleanup, the frame rails were painted bright red number 104 from One Shot brand, and the floor gets painted some flat aluminum. The seat is flat black with a flat red seat belt detail, and the T-handle on the shifter is flat aluminum. Now assemble these parts, and remember, scrape the paint off before you glue them. I assembled the roll cage, which had been painted red and detailed with some flat black for the padding, etc., separately on a flat surface to make sure it would fit. But then when I put it on the aluminum floor pan, it still needed a little help, so I attached a couple of rubber bands around it to let the glue set and keep it all into position. Here you can see the completed chassis with the front and the rear support rails, and the engine will be added. Now remember, scrape that paint off as you need to. The underside of the chassis shows where the rear springs and the rear axle are in place, and the drive shaft got painted white. Center section of the rear axle is flat aluminum, and the axle ends are painted the same red as the chassis. The roll cage is also a red color, and place the engine into position on its mounts and aligned with the drive shaft there. And so here you can see the rolling chassis. You note that I painted the wheels gold with red caps and slipped the axle, the shorter axle in the front there through the axle blocks, and then just squeeze the wheels and the hubs together on each side to install the wheels there, and the longer axle slips through the frame at the rear, and then go ahead and install the rear wheels. I assembled the fuel cell, and there's the battery, but unfortunately there's no trunk to install them into, and they wouldn't be seen anyway as the trunk doesn't open, so I just left them out there. Now spare parts and available for your stash. We can work on the body now, and it's remarkably clear of parting lines, but there are some slight ones there. So sand off the entire body with a little, give it a little scuffing, and then go ahead and attach the rub rails, and those are placed horizontally along the belt line there across the doors on the body's sides. Now after that, also attach the hood scoop to the hood, and then prime the body and give it a good overall fine sanding. Now once that's dry, you can paint it. I used One Shot's metallic gold number 109 and their black 199 with an airbrush to apply the paint here. As you can see, of course, I masked off the bottom there and painted the gold on top after the black was dried. After the paints had cured, I added a red stripe between the black and gold with a striping brush, and after that I added a few of the kit's decals. As you can see, this one turns out to be lucky number 13. Now on the decal sheet you'll also find decals for hooker headers and M&H slicks, but you'll have to supply those parts in order for the decals to be appropriate. After the decals had dried overnight, I tried to mock up and fit the body onto the chassis, but as you can see, the stance was way off in the rear end, so I suspected something might be wrong. I removed the body and tried to lower the rear support rails a bit to see if that would assist. It didn't help much, and it turns out that the suspension is not the problem. So I found that the entire roll cage was a little high, but that was easily done by cutting the side bars above the bar that the steering wheel is attached to and removing about 1/8 of an inch and gluing the bars back together again. So to even the roll cage out, I also had to cut the rear of the cage above the horizontal bar and remove about 1/8 of an inch there, and then glue the bars back together to keep the roll cage at the same height all around. Okay, now we're talking. The modifications allowed the body to sit lower on the chassis. And note there's really no way to lower the rear suspensions to make this work, with just that. So I think when you install this roll cage, you might want to shorten it up right away. The safety grid for the driver gets installed from underneath the car. And so, you can remove the mock-up there and place this into position. I just adhered it to the where the windshield area was on the inside of the body with some clear glue, and it actually looks pretty convincing to me. It's kind of a nice touch. The grille, bumpers, and the core support have been added here. Just glue those into position, and after the core support's been installed, the upper radiator hose can be added. Remember, scrape all that paint off before you try to glue parts together. The hood pins are painted with a little bit of aluminum color, as well as the hood scoop deflector here, and that's to keep debris, especially paper and shredded tires, from getting sucked into the engine, just like the screen is in front of the driver. Front crash bar here was painted the same red color as the roll bar, and then installed into the front. And I added some black wash to the grille to give it a little definition. But now it's time to take her out for a few laps and have some fun. So at this point, I added a little, let's call it road effect to the car with some mixture of dirt and water, and sprayed that through the airbrush as it would kind of appear mostly behind those rear wheels to give it a little bit of track experience. You'll have a few pieces left over, mostly decals, and of course the smaller tire for the track setup, but these can go right into your stash and be used for the next kit bash you want to make. So there you have it. With that done, your model is complete, and it looks like a road warrior for sure. Right off of the track at the corner down there outside of town. And as you can see, it makes a really nice looking shelf sitter. It's kind of it draws your eye in. And if I were you, I'd buy one and put it on my shelf. We hope you like this step-by-step premium quality scale model kit review. And so that you don't miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking on the icon in the lower right of any of our reviews. Or you can find us on Facebook or our website, rightonreplicas.com. Thanks!